Everybody gets to make their decision. All right, it says that we're going live. And it says we're live right there on the YouTube for the, April 2022 Westlake Charter School Board meeting. Board President Gollop, you have the floor.
Thank you. We don't have our normal how to give public comments parts, given the fact we're meeting hybrid, but I will go ahead and do a shout out that if anyone watching on the YouTube wants to make a comment tonight, they can email admin@westlakecharter.com. It's right at the top of the agenda. We just ask that you note what item you're writing in on, so that we can read it in at the right time. We'll make every effort to read it in. We just ask that it be limited to 250 words. And with that, Amy, would you mind taking the roll, please?
Sure. Hope?
Here.
Sean?
Here.
Josh? Michelle?
Here.
Jamie?
Here.
Lila?
Here.
Shannon?
Here.
Jed? We have a quorum.
Perfect, thank you. Celebrations, who wants to start?
I'll start.
Thank you.
I will celebrate decisions to be made. We are in the position where my oldest has been accepted to several colleges and is making the decision of where he wants to go, what he wants to do next year. So it's nice to be in the position of being able to make a decision. This year sounds as if it's been kind of a rough year with colleges, so it's nice to have options.
That's awesome.
It's so fun to hear about our former explorers and where they're headed. Shannon, I'll just go to the right my right around the room.
I celebrated this at Impact, but because I'm going back to celebrate again with them in person. My sister had a baby, so I'm an aunt for the first time, and so going back I'm creating a spring break for myself to play with them again.
Very good, very good.
Jamie.
I'm going to celebrate that we have one more day until spring break.
Woo-woo.
And I can feel it, so I'm really excited about that.
I was going to second that one. We do not have a student here, but in the same boat. Steve, you want to pop up and celebrate? You want to go and play? Sorry.
No, it's okay.
No.
Can I do one personal, one professional?
Absolutely.
So I think on the professional side, a shout out to Diane Lee. We've had a number of logistical interview kind of hoops and all these things recently, and Diane has just crushed it. So just a public shout out to her and all the work that she has done. If you see her at all, acknowledge that hard work. And then also to Sean's point on decision day, we also had a decision time in our house, and Nico made a decision, so he will be headed to Irvine next year. So we're super excited for him.
Congratulations. That's cool.
Peter the Anteater. One of my favorites. Michelle.
I will celebrate, it's actually National Public Health Week, so I will celebrate all the great work that public health does, and hopefully you guys check it out and see what the week is about.
Super cool.
Sean and Steve, I'm on the other end of the spectrum. I'm going to celebrate my kindergartner. My oldest is in kindergarten, and I'm just going to celebrate the use of the phonics program here. It is amazing to watch your kids learn how to read. It's just amazing, and the kindergarten team is just killing it, and just so grateful for her teacher.
Oh, that's awesome.
I also have two that I'd like to share, one personal, one, I guess, professional. I just want to celebrate the school and the processes we've put into place for hiring. I had the privilege of serving on the panel and going through the process, beginning with the anti-bias training and seeing how objective it was, and you'll see the fruit of that success tonight. But I just really want to celebrate that. I'm not sure, I don't know of any organization that has a practice as strong as ours, and it should be celebrated and replicated everywhere. Personally, I'd like to celebrate the fact, so my daughter's aged out of Westlake, but Holocaust Remembrance Day, it takes place during their spring break, and tomorrow they're doing a very large assembly, bringing in survivors and friends and a rabbi, and they're really digging into it. And so it feels like something even organic. Like, we have those discussions all the time, but it's interesting to see other schools like taking on that work. And so I just want to celebrate that, the fact that things are getting more normal, and we're starting to come together and learn again and celebrate those that are different than us, and I just think it's fabulous.
Love it. I love it. I would like to celebrate, and I will celebrate multiple times tonight as I introduce you to our brand new kindergarten through 8th grade Westlake Charter School Explorer principal. I'm not gonna, she's sitting right over there. If you're on YouTube, you can't see her. She's right over there. But I'm gonna celebrate and introduce her later. But I want to celebrate the meeting somebody who I think is going to be a brilliant fit for our community. We're really glad. The process was great, but we introduced her to staff today, and staff were like, "Yes, this is going to be great." So, a wonderful celebration there.
Amy, do you want to?
Yeah, so I will celebrate something unique about our school in that when I have a kiddo in first grade, you all heard about him helping me up off the ground after 2 hours. He's feeling a little anxious about all the talk about going on to second grade next year. And so today he did a really great job in his first grade class, so he and I went on a field trip to a second grade class and got to hang out for 15 minutes where he got to ask questions and touch and see and feel things. And I would show you the pictures. The teacher was so kind and loving to him and made him feel so good. And when we were done, he said, "I think I can do second grade." Yeah, you can. And just that we can take that kind of time to just 15 minutes out of the day made this a whole world of difference for this kid. So I'm excited for him to listen. Great.
I'm very proud of him.
That brings us to item 4, which are there any board comments for items that aren't on the agenda? Seeing none, that brings us to public comments. Do we have any in-person public comments? Seeing none, John, do we have any email?
There are none in the email.
Perfect. So we'll go ahead and bypass that for now, but as comments come in, if they come in on different agenda items, we will pause and read those in as they come up. Our first report would be the WAVE report, and do you have that from Amber?
I do. Right here. She says our current focus for WAVE is the International Festival on the 30th of April, Staff Appreciation Week, which is coming up. I don't remember when, but it's coming. And recruiting volunteers for the 22-23 events. And have a great spring break.
That's the most important one right there.
Yeah.
Let's go.
On that note, if board members would please put on their calendar the International Festival. Development, I think, is going to spearhead having the booth, but I think it would be great if all board members, if you have time to come in out for an hour, we'll all pitch this together, but just mark it down for now, and we'll figure out a cycle. I'd really appreciate it. It's a great opportunity for us to connect with our community in a way we haven't been able to for the last, I was going to say a few years, but at least it's only 2. With that, Shannon and Impact.
Yes. I was trying to pull up my notes, but my internet is crashing. So we met in person for the first time, which is very exciting. And John presented some thinking on how we can focus in our efforts to create this data or equity data dashboard. What kind of data we want to collect, how often, what that looks like, what the commitment of board and staff time is to create that. So I think it helped us focus again a little more narrowly because all of us want to solve everything, which is not realistic. And so focus more narrowly on what we're talking about, who we're talking about, and what that might look like. And so now we're going to convene to kind of think about milestones and a timeline, and is this something the board can support? Is this something we need to hire some people over the summer to do? Is this something we can kind of expand a current role? So we're meeting on that. We will be back with some direction, and maybe we keep it going. Maybe we say this is not actually a board thing, and we figure out our next equity project.
I love it.
For development, I guess I'll step in for Josh. So we spent a lot of time talking about the sponsor and explorer for Museum of Tolerance, doing posters, going to businesses, hanging signs, using of a QR code to help people more easily donate and to help send students. That, like I had just mentioned before, there's plans for a booth, 2 large posters that people can scan as they walk by, as well as meeting and greeting and explaining why this trip fits our mission and vision and what's an ideal trip for our 9th graders. There is a discussion of grants, how that work should be parsed out, what pieces can we have prepared in the tank so that they're always ready to go versus what pieces will require drafting. But that's all still in discussion and moving forward. We're getting a lot done in development, so it's really great.
Very exciting.
Sean, in finance.
So finance did not meet last month, but we do have a holdover from last month's board meeting on this month's agenda. So we'll pretend that we did, and so certificated comp is on the agenda for today.
Perfect. And then governance met right before this meeting. What we're basically doing at this point is starting to get ready for our annual meeting, which will take place in June. So that's talking succession, appointments, processes, reviewing bylaws, what changes need to be made, and sort of how this board functions and improvements and change and growth and what we'd like to see. So more to come from that. I think there might be pieces next month, but certainly preparation for our June meeting.
Yeah.
With that, John.
Well, hi, everybody. Happy April? April it is. April, because May's right around the corner. From my executive director's report today, I'll obviously start with some celebrations. I've got some strategic actions, and I have one update tonight, and that update is we hired an amazing KE principal that I'm going to introduce you to, and I can't wait to get to that part. So I'll talk quick to get through the good stuff right here. All of our celebrations, a couple of our students who were not only had their artwork hung at the Crocker Art Museum, but each of them took a first and second place prize there for student artwork at the Crocker. Really proud of our students and their work there. Westlake Charter High School had a big sports rally. The kids loved it. We had a little face painting on, and it was all outdoor in the Oasis. And the 6th through 8th graders kicked off our after-school live sports, and it is rocking. If you're a volleyball fan at all, I think we have, I'm looking around for somebody who knows. I think it's 100. Is it 100? Then we have 100 6th through 8th graders playing co-ed volleyball. I think the last time we did it, which was 2 years ago, pre-pandemic, I mean, I think there was 40, but maybe it was 30, and now there's 100. So it is awesome. Kids are having a great time out there rocking some after-school volleyball. And speaking of after-school, here's After-School Live Glee Club, which will be singing songs from The Greatest Showman, which, come on, like, oh my gosh. I will burst into this song right now. I love this soundtrack. So they're also going to be singing the national anthem at a promotion coming your way in June. Hint, hint, Westlake Charter School. This teacher's assistant, this TA elective, which is kind of new, a new elective for us, is just changing the game at Westlake Charter School, right? So you have teacher's assistants going down younger grades, helping in the classroom, but you also have front office assistants. I walked in the front office today, and here's 2 8th graders. Hello, welcome to Westlake Charter School. I'm like, oh, this is great. So really a cool elective for our 8th graders, or middle schoolers get the opportunity to be teacher's assistants during this 6-week elective. And come on, this is it. This is the celebration. Families are back on campus. We're back in person for board meetings, but just since our last board meeting, so much has happened. On campus, coffee talk, on campus. This picture on the right is the People Who Make a Difference unit, the 2nd grade unit where they do the wax museum, and the kids put a little button, and you push the button, and they go, hello, my name is, and they tell you who their character is, and they all dress up, and it was awesome. Moms and dads and families and grandparents, and they were all on campus. It felt really good to have families on campus again. Here it is, the People Who Make a Difference unit. Just a fantastic day. Here's some. Oh, it says WCS signing day. That's not true. I mistitled that. But all those kids should go to WCHS because they crushed it. That's the award-winning paper roller coaster from the middle school paper roller coaster unit. These groups all competed for which paper roller coaster operated the best and was the most creative. That's the winning one right there. But it's all constructed out of paper. It's a marble maze, tons of fun. I went out there, and Mrs. Mixis was judging it, and the kids were cheering each other on. It was fabulous. This is just a shout out to our student support services team, kindergarten through 12th grade. At every level of the organization, the student support services team is making sure that our students get what they need, when they need it, as long as they need it to be successful for their own personal goals. I mean, they got magic bubbles blowing right there, in primary, elementary grades, but all the way up, through the high school. We're making sure students are getting what they need, when they need it, as long as they need it to be successful. It's just such a celebration to recognize that we're expanding into high school, but the magic bubbles down below, keeping somebody engaged. The structures and the scaffolding looks different, but it's all that same mission all the way through the high school. I'd like to introduce our K-8 principal later today. This is me and her on the stage today in front of the entire staff with confetti cannons. I really, I'll introduce you to our principal in a moment. I just really wanted to celebrate the confetti cannons. How cool is that? How many people get a new job and you're like, by the way, first day, confetti cannons. Yeah, the staff absolutely just came out in droves. Everyone got an opportunity to meet our new K-8 principal, and I'll be introducing her to the board and to the YouTubes tonight. We'll talk you through some strategic actions, then some updates. Again, my update is about our new K-8 principal. Strategic actions, we're talking staffing for the 22-23 school year, re-engaging our community, which is a kind of a directive straight from this boardroom. This boardroom said we need to start now and go through the entire next year focusing on re-engaging this community in what we hope is a post-pandemic era. And the last piece is I want to just bring you up to speed on our WASC initial report. Teaching positions. I'm going to focus on teaching positions for just a moment. You know, if you look at the local, regional, national news, teacher shortages are reaching critical stages. We just saw an article out of San Francisco Unified this morning about the number of teachers that are leaving San Francisco Unified and how many are predicted to not be leaving and returning anywhere, saying, hey, you know what? This has been enough. I'm out. There's a critical crisis in teacher staffing right now. Now, look, we've looked into our own recruitment pools, and they do look thinner than they have in the past, but we've been very lucky thus far and met some amazing candidates and made some incredible hires for the fall. So we're really lucky, but I got to tell you, it's going to be tough out there going forward. Now, at Westlake Charter School K-8, we have no openings K-5. We've done our intent to return. We know who, we talked to every single person who's considering whether or not to, stay in the grade level they're in or move, but we have no openings right now, and we have 2 openings that we're still working on filling 6th through 8th grade, and at the high school, we're in the middle of our interview process right now. In fact, I know we had interviews today for a social science position, so that's for 10th grade. Hey, I think we're in a good spot, and we're lucky. We got great recruitment agents like Emily Batten, Jen Kayau, these teams out there really doing a good job recruiting, but it's a tough market out there, and I want us to be aware of that, and our team's certainly aware of it, and digging deep to make sure we get the right people on board. Administrative positions. We had an active K-8 principal search. That search is now completed. Very excited about that. And we do have our K-12 Director of Student Support Services position that is in progress right now. We may be able to button that up as soon as the next 24 to 48 hours, and we'll kind of come back here and update you as that comes to fruition. But we've had just such great interview processes for these administrative positions. We've included, board members on the panels, certificated, classified, family members. It's really been a great process, and I think it's led to some incredible outcomes. And so I can't wait till we can announce one and the other and move forward and start onboarding these amazing new leaders. You can see some pictures down the side there about, demonstrating our re-engagement with our community, not just in person, but also virtually as well. Families invited on campus, arrival and dismissal. We've had tons of families on campus. Feels great. Coffee talks, live in person, feels great. Sports spectatorship. I mean, the volleyball game was jam-packed. The soccer games have been like shoulder to shoulder down the sidelines. It feels great to have people on campus. On our kindergarten through 8th grade principal hiring committee, we had teachers, board members, family members, classified staff, and it just was like, oh, we're in person, we're all together, and we're doing the important mission work. It just feels great. I told you about the people who make a difference presentations that happened in 2nd grade yesterday. The place was jam-packed, and it felt so nice to have families back on campus. A couple of upcoming events coming to a campus near you. We have 2 open houses, one at the high school, one at the K-8. We've staggered it because there's never enough time to get through open house. Might as well do it twice so families can really get to the classrooms that they want to get to. We have a great opportunity on open house because traditionally open house is this big, like, I've been planning for 4 months. My kids have been producing all this work product. I'm putting the work product up. I got some English, some math, some science, some social science, some artwork. But that's the assumption, kind of based on the assumption that you were there at back to school night and you saw the classroom. And you've been dropping your student off and picking them up and you've been seeing inside the classroom. I mean, open house is like, hey, you've already been in the classroom 15 times. Here it is on a big special night. We're going to rebrand it this year as a day in the life. We're not putting on a big dog and pony show with 27 different, we want you to walk in and see, hey, you've never seen your child's classroom. You've never stepped inside the door. So rather than make it look different than it does all year, our goal this year is to make it look like it does on any day of learning. So you walk in and for the first time all year get a chance to see how your child arrives to class and what class looks like on a typical day. We're going to kind of brand it up and have a lot of fun with it. You know, for COVID safety, some of our staff are even going to stand outside and set up their classroom as a choose your own adventure. You get a little map, you walk around the classroom, see the artifacts, but if you want to engage with the teachers, you can do so outside. As you all recognize, masks are no longer mandated, but they're strongly recommended. And so, you know, while we're all together on campus, we'll be following safety protocols that make us all feel safe and allowing for people to indoor versus outdoor, maybe some food trucks to draw us back onto the blacktop for some mingling, all the things. Open houses are going to be great. We also have, as you mentioned, the International Festival. Is it the 15th annual? 15th annual? 16th annual? I heard a whisper from the crowd. Would this be the 16th annual? The 16th annual International Festival, which would be the longest running international festival in the region, right? There are a few other international festivals a little younger than ours, but way to go, Westlake Charter School. So we'll bring that back live and in person on April 30th. Community connections off campus, right? Like, hey, oh yeah, we're bringing a lot of people on campus, but here's some things that we're doing that we haven't been doing for 2 years, and they're some of the biggest, most important opportunities for exploration for our little explorers, right? Students and staff are traveling to New York and Washington, D.C. like tomorrow. 6th grade is gearing up for Sierra Outdoor School. 8th grade's gearing up for Santa Cruz. So here we are. We're back in this era where we're starting to reconnect with our larger community, right? Our place in the global world and the places that we travel to as explorers. So very excited about these pieces right here. And the last thing I'll talk about tonight for strategic actions is our WASC initial report. WASC, the Western Association of Schools and Colleges, they're the accrediting agent for all public institutions west of the Mississippi, as far south as Guam. Anyone who awards credit, like on a transcript, is typically accredited through WASC. As we are opening up that high school that's going to award credit on a transcript, we have to give them an initial 25-page report to orient our WASC chair to our practices. No problem. 25-page report. Our first draft, 75 pages. Apparently we like to describe our practices. We're a little long-winded. I blame me. But we love, you know, we're not a brand new school. We're not this brand new school that's trying to figure out our initial practices. We're a 15-year, 17-year organization with lots of blueprinted practices. So yes, that first draft was 75 pages. I think we got it down to a very concise 61 pages. After Hope Golick did some editing, thank you so much. Our final draft has been submitted and is under review right now from our WASC chair. She's amazing and gave us lots of feedback before we gave her our final draft. And now that it's being reviewed, our next steps are we'll be meeting with our WASC chair after spring break, and then we'll have our initial WASC visit on May 6th, which is like tomorrow. So it's very exciting for us. We'll have our initial visit, we'll get some feedback, and we'll talk about next steps going forward. Before I walk out of strategic actions, I talked about staffing, I talked about reconnecting with our community, and I talked about a WASC visitation. Any questions, thoughts, or concerns about strategic action?
No, I think I would mention that 10 of those pages in that WASC report, roughly, are charter school related questions. And so I found that a very interesting piece of the process, that part of the reason why our report would need to be longer is doing all the explanations about the strength of our board and the strength of governance on this campus and our policies that are in place and how we ensure certain things. And as having had the opportunity to read the report and edit, it only made me all the more proud of the work this board has done to make us a thriving board, and then to be able to highlight it as part of this initial report. So I really appreciated the opportunity to review and do that, and then pause and have some gratitude about all the work we've done together.
Yeah. I would typically make some joke like, hey, if you have trouble sleeping, we'll give you some reading material here. You know, it's this big, but honestly, it is actually a great little, you should see how well this high school has started under your leadership, because we have so many years of documentation that says, here are our blueprints, here are our shared leadership practices, here are our curricular practices. So it's nice. We're in a good place right now. I think you'll be proud of the work that's being done. Well, let's do some updates. What possibly could we be updating tonight? Oh, look, we'll be introducing our K-8 principal with confetti. It's not Everest. It's Jessica Gombour. But very excited. This is the presentation that I gave before the staff, and I wanted you to know, why are you laughing at the confetti?
If only it wasn't so, exactly precise.
It's everywhere. It's all over campus right now. There's confetti everywhere. Yes.
It glittered.
It's
It was metallic, it was you
Yes.
deserve it, but it was a rock concert level
Yeah.
of confetti.
It was a lot of confetti. I maybe over-ordered confetti. My fault. Let's jump in. Let's have some fun. So I want to talk about the principal recruitment process, because we cast a very wide net, and I want you all to recognize, we kind of went all out and made sure we cast a wide net to make sure that we were recruiting, as it says in our strategic plan, high quality leadership for our school. We had thousands of impressions on Facebook and Twitter and on the Instagrams. We sent out over 12,000 direct emails to administrators around the state of California saying, are you our next K-8 principal? We have people from LA going, why are you emailing me? I'm not moving. Well, just checking, We cast a very wide net. We had thousands of clicks on our materials, so we know that people knew about this opportunity, and we had an incredibly competitive applicant pool. I mean, as you read through the applicant pool that we had to field through, it was really challenging to get down to enough people you can fit in one day's worth of interviews. We actually went a little farther than we'd ever gone before. What we typically do is the administrative team, would do a screening, and then we thought, that's an administrative perspective. Let's assemble a second team, including classified staff, at least one parent, and certificated staff, including teachers from primary all the way through elementary and middle school, to do a second screening, and then let's put the numbers together and see how it comes out. So based on a double-blind screening process, we got a very competitive group of applicants in for interviews. The interview panel itself represented our entire community. I talked about it before, but it was parents, teachers, classified, administration, our board, all in these interviews. It was a wonderful interview process right here in this boardroom. We did crowdsource qualifications. We asked our teachers, we asked our families through surveys, what are you looking for in our next principal? And I'm really proud of what they told us and what we found. They're looking for somebody who can stay present and in the moment, who's a facilitator, somebody who would meet staff where they are, but be the face of our school and still hold that 10,000-foot view of all things under the umbrella. Somebody with a wide range of educational experience, somebody who is kind and patient and supportive of staff, and collaborative, and somebody comfortable leading, not somebody who's brand new to the leadership game. Somebody who's an active listener. And so we think we met these qualifications because we put them on the screen here. And when you meet this person, you will recognize, oh yeah, this is great. We knew who we were looking for, and we found that person. This person has elementary and middle school teaching experience, which is fantastic for all of our teaching staff to recognize this person understands both sides of our K-8 house. She's a teacher trainer at an incredibly high level and is presented at the national level on some exemplary practices, which I would love to go into on some of the things she's presented on. They're phenomenal. She has served as a vice principal for 7 years at a 1,300-seat middle school that's high performing, incredibly diverse, with an incredibly engaged community through her leadership. She's really got leadership chops that she brings to this house right here. Her areas of expertise align with the things that we're doing and the things we're looking for. And I know we don't all speak acronym soup here, but like this MTSS, PBIS, even the AVID jam is our jam. The fact that she's an expert in restorative practices is important to us because we speak restorative practices here. But the story I heard when I talked to one of her colleagues was, hey, when she 6 years ago kind of started with some restorative practices, a lot of us were like, oh, I'm not sure, that's uncomfortable, it's outside of my comfort zone. And here we are 6 years later, none of us could imagine a school where these practices weren't the center of what we're doing. And to me, that speaks to a leader who recognizes that we stretch slowly along some continuum and we manage change the way that we manage change here at Westlake. So I think she's a great fit for those type of practices, but that type of change management. She was the staff, student, and community equity coordinator who brought people to the table, brought in community members, students, staff members, parents, the superintendent, and held circles around equity on campus, and did some incredible work that's been recognized regionally. She's highly qualified with her credentials. But this is my favorite part. When we called around and said, hey, what do you think of this person? These are the things we heard in her references. People said that she realizes each and everyone's value, the work they do, and the commitments they make. She easily and effectively communicates with a wide range of different audiences. She's an effective practitioner and visionary leader, has built strong relationships with teachers, parents, and students. She's an exceptional leader committed to principles of educational equity, restorative practices, and social justice. One person said she is one of the strongest humans I know with a consistent high expectation for behavior, teaching, and learning. And this is my favorite one right here. She makes each individual feel like they are the only person in the room when she's talking to you. Ladies and gentlemen, I have no confetti ready for you, but I want you to imagine it when I say her name. Confetti going up. Please welcome to our boardroom our brand new K-8 principal of Westlake Charter School, Mrs. Jessica Gallenborn. Hey, Steve, you turn on the, oh, Jess, you got it?
I don't know. Is it on?
The videos.
No, Steve, turn on the video on that Google Meet over there. We're going to have Mrs. Gallenberg say hello to our board if we can, and we'll get her on the YouTubes so all of you at home can meet our brand new K-8 principal. There we go. There we go. We are on. Welcome, Mrs. Gallenberg. Thank you for being here.
Thank you so much for having me. Thank you for the amazing introduction and all of the confetti. It really did. All of this today is completely surreal. I am honored. I am humbled to be chosen to work here. I have been incredibly interested specifically to work with this team of people on this campus. So I applied with great intention because what you all are doing here at Westlake is something that is so different than is around. And it's every single value and core essence of like what you stand by, it all represents everything that is aligned to what I believe. And so I am so excited to be part of this team. I'm excited to learn from all of the educators that work here, and whatever I can bring with my own experience to help move things forward and to kind of start a new time in education, especially after such a grueling last couple of years. Whatever I can do to support our teachers and educators is what I'm all about. So thank you very much for welcoming me, and we're going to celebrate from here forward.
There we go. Hey, Mrs. Gallenberg, we're super excited you're here, and thank you for speaking to the board. One of the things you and I talked about when I met with Mrs. Gallenberg, she says, hey, I'm great in front of a crowd. I mean, I like being in front of a crowd, but in reality, I love meeting with people one-on-one. True story?
Yes, true. I really, really am a relationship person, and I enjoy kind of one-on-one conversations to really learn about people, their experience, their story, their perspectives, and how we can collaborate to move forward together. And so I'm really excited to be able to put that out there for community members to be able to meet with me, staff members to be able to meet with me. I'm super excited.
So I know we're gonna drag you out to a coffee talk or two in the next couple of months, but we're also gonna be launching a link in the Westlake Weekly. We'll make sure the board has access to that as well, so that you can select a time to sit down with Mrs. Gallimore and, share your Westlake story. I think she'd love to hear from each of you and anyone out there on the YouTubes who's part of the community. We'd love to have people between this spring and next fall really help to inform Mrs. Gallimore of how we jam, but also let her share her story as well. So that's a true story. We're going to do that.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for being here. Woo-hoo! All right. Well, I think that wraps up my slides. It does. Yes, that is back to you on the agenda.
Perfect. Would you mind, before we take up our consent agenda, just confirming if there are any public comments that have come in?
Let me take a look here.
While he does that, I'll go ahead and
that's exciting.
mention that we have 3 items on our consent agenda tonight. We have the minutes from our last meeting, approving our monetary donations, and then accepting and approving the 22-23 employee handbook, which feels really weird to say that we're already preparing for 22 and 23. You've heard a lot about it tonight already, but I find it mind-blowing.
Yes, there are no public comments.
Perfect. With that, are there any questions on the consent agenda? And if not, is there a motion to approve?
I will move the consent agenda.
Thank you, Sean. Is there a second?
I will second.
Thanks, Jamie.
Oh,
Yes.
Sean
Yes.
and Michelle?
Can I do abstention on A, yes on B and C? Thank you.
Janie?
Yes.
Lila?
Yes.
Shannon?
Also abstention on A and yes on B and C.
Okay. What does that mean? We're good. Okay.
We're fine.
I had to process.
No, I know. Yes.
Thank you.
Spring break, Monday.
Yes.
That brings us to action items. The only item on tonight is accept and approve certificated compensation proposal. Just before we kick off this item, I do want to note that our 2 staff members will not be voting on this item tonight, due to the obvious conflict of interest on that vote, but will be remaining in the room. We just ask that neither of you provide comment on this item to address the refusal. With that, I believe, Steve, you're presenting.
Do you want to drive in that?
Yeah, or do you want to switch spots? I don't care. It's your call. I can drive.
Drive it.
Yeah, okay, cool.
What could go wrong?
What could possibly go wrong?
Hey, it's okay. So just want to start off this evening with a little bit of gratitude and thank the Finance Committee for all the work. They do meet, with the exception of last month, really every month to talk about the financial and fiduciary responsibilities of the school. And this is one of the key pieces that they've talked about every year for the past, I think, 8 years or so. So just a shout out to Sean, Hope, and Josh as well for meeting every month and taking the time to go beyond traditional board duties and talking with the finance team. So this is just a little bit of the work that the finance team has done over this particular year. Again, it starts in early August with dusting off the matrices that we look at annually, both the geographic and the simulation matrices, and then pulling salary schedules from those who we're going to compare against, reviewing those, editing them against budget proposals that are coming out from the governor, January time mark, looking at future projections, and then thinking about possibilities and what might be able to sit out there. So all of that happens throughout the year, and then once they are able to review and vet, they traditionally approve something in committee to bring forward to the board. So a lot of work happens prior to it back in the years to So there's 3 things that we'll be looking at tonight as part of the compensation proposal for staff. The first is a updated salary schedule, which we have seen over the past couple of years. The second is something that is new from a compensation standpoint. It's a sick leave for certificated staff. And then the third thing is also something that's come up before the board before. This is a little bit different manner though this year, and it's a one-time bonus for our certificated staff. So when we look at the certificated salary schedule annually, we compare it to local or geographic schools. Those are our neighbors, really. And also our similar schools. And those us, right? We're not as big as 21st, right? We're not as big as Elk Grove. But we do compare against them on the geographic matrix because we are geographically close to them. On our similar schools matrix, we are closely aligned from like an enrollment standpoint and funding standpoint to West Lake. So we also want to compare against them to see how we are. So this first one is a, oh, it's really small. It's also in the packet. Is our geographic schools matrix. So the top there, you can really see, well, no, you can't really see it, but where we would be against on our current salary schedule. And then one below, so if you want to click really ahead real quick. There you go.
Oh, there we go.
You can see if we were to move to our proposed salary schedule, which we anecdotally call it 5211, and that is a first-year teacher who's brand new out of the gate, so has not earned any units, but has a credential with earning $52,000. So you can see kind of where that comparison sits. And that comparison sits with our current distributed staff salary model. We're about 4% under on our kind of geographic schools matrix. And if we move to the 5211, we are essentially net even. Just fractionally under 0.19%, but we are very closely aligned to our partners who honestly are much bigger than us, and we see quite a bit more funding. But again, it's nice to know we're at least similar to our G. So the next one is our similar schools matrix. Also not easy to see, apologize for that, but it's in the packet. If we were to do the same thing and compare against using our current salary schedule and then the 5211 as well, you can see that our current salary schedule, we're about 4% over. Again, these are the schools who are more likely funded like us, more look like us. And if we move to the proposed schedule, we're just a little bit more than 8% more. So a balance between the two. Again, between those who are close to us and those who more represent us. So the proposal here this evening is to increase or to accept the increase in the salary schedule, and the actual schedule itself is in the packet as well before you this evening. So the other piece is in regards to sick leave. This is something that was new to the committee this year. The committee spent a lot of time to look at it. The committee considered sick leave, vacation time. We did some good exploratory work around that. We talked to our CalSTRS partners and say, hey, what is possible? What do folks do? And we really looked into it quite a bit. We did find that the law allows, also in the packet, up to 12 days of sick leave per year. We know that going beyond that can cause some what's called excess sick leave penalties, essentially, that come directly back to, would come back to Westlake. But we could go up to 12 days. Currently, we offer 10 days, which is a fair standard when you look at our other partners, both locally and in the similar schools matrix. We did consider vacation, look at that. We could not really find it sitting out there anywhere. But the sick leave was the one the committee kind of revolved around. So the proposal this evening is to increase sick days from 10 days to 12 days per 1.0 FTE. And there's language in the handbook, and there has been consistently around rounding and what it looks like, but it would increase to 12 days for certificated staff. I think this one is particularly important as we come out of the pandemic. I mean, sick days have been used, in the past for, someone will bank it and use it for retirement. Someone goes out on leave and will use it for leave purposes. And now with just obviously coming out of COVID and having to take care of either yourself or someone else, or needing some mental health supports, having these 2 additional days could certainly be a benefit. And then the last item tonight is a one-time off-schedule bonus. Again, something we've been using for quite a while. And so this particularly is something that, again, we have traditionally used in the past, but for the following school year. So when the board has considered one-time courses in the past, we sometimes issue them in, say, October of the following year. This is a little bit different. This year, we're asking the boards to approve tonight $1,000 for certificated staff. And again, it aligns closely to what we have done with our classified staff. So earlier this year, we took a look at our classified staff and some of the retention challenges we were having. So we offered our classified staff $1,000 spread out in $200 increments over several months. So tonight we're asking the board to approve, again, $1,000 one-time off schedule to be provided to certificated staff, again, on a 1.0 FTE basis, again, payable prior to the end of June 30th. So altogether, I think, oh yeah, there it is. This kind of summarizes the three proposals. There's more details in the packet in the board brief as well, but I'm happy to take any questions or any feedback from the community members here.
So just to confirm, Steve, because of how the slide was read versus what's going to happen in reality, one slide farther back, please, John. So the payments are not like going to be, for example, retroactive for February and March and April, right? At this point, it will just be that you're authorized to pay out that $1,000 in total by June 30th.
Correct, right.
Correct.
So the classified staff who have been receiving $200 for certificated staff, the intention is a $1,000 kind of lump sum, if you will.
I just want to make sure that
Yeah,
everyone,
it's good clarification.
because it is different, but it's different but the same. Sean, as chair, was there anything else that you wanted to highlight about this proposal?
No, I don't think so. I think Steve did a good job. Thank you.
I think the only thing I would just reiterate is in looking out, in the out years, as well as taking into account potential upcoming uses of our reserve funds, that we still remain in a positive budget outlook, and so that the school can afford these recommendations put before you this evening. And if there aren't any other questions, is there a motion?
I will move.
Thank you, Sean, and I'll actually second.
Oh,
Yes.
Sean,
Yes.
Michelle,
Yes.
Shannon.
Yes.
So that brings us, I didn't check for public comment.
Yep.
Sorry.
No problem.
I'm out of practice. In person, I feel like everyone here would be able to say something, but I do like the opportunity for people not here to be able to comment.
No comments.
Perfect, thank you. That brings us on to our discussion item for this evening, which is goals and succession planning. That's a hard word.
We had a good conversation today at the governance team regarding board succession planning. So we'd love to have a governance member maybe recap that. If I want to talk about goals, I do have one slide. It was just some preliminary potential footholds for executive director goals and board goals as well. So I'll put that slide up there. And I think one of the goals that's noted here for a board goal is actually regarding succession planning, which is a hard word to say. And we can talk through that if a governance member wants to speak to that. So under the executive director goals, looking back through the last several months of board notes and watching us on the YouTube. By the way, we look great. I've watched this all now for the last week or so. I've been kind of pouring through our old conversations, dating back to when we had our board workshop and went through the strat plan and tried to talk about what are some potential goals, specifically for the executive director, because as they come up to my own evaluative review, I kind of go, hey, we didn't have goals for me this year. I think our goal was like, buckle up, hold on tight. It's been quite a couple of years, but it'd be nice to start casting some of that vision looking forward. So, I definitely heard loud and clear the board say, let's focus on reconnecting with our community. That SEL on the adult side, right? So I think that's a piece for us. I'd love to see us if we're going to do that as an exec goal. Part of that is we're plugging in this new principal at the K-8. We're expanding to 10th grade at the high school. Those are all fall under there. And I think that falls under goal area 1 for sure, demonstrating what's possible in school and community collaborate. But I could probably use some work wordsmithing that out. Onboarding new leadership, I wove in there because we did discuss that for a brief moment at a meeting regarding, we're going to, because I announced that we're going to have a new principal and a new director of student support services, and we're bringing on a new assistant principal at the high school, and that's a lot of new leaders. So I think part of the charge you should lean on me for is, because we talked about succession planning within the organization, the leadership, you should charge me with making sure those new leaders are onboarded and rooted and not going to turn over. That one of them is eyeballing my job. You know, like we want everyone staying here and moving up through the organization. Goal areas 2 and 3, I mean, we talk about developing an academic and social emotional monitoring system. We're talking about an equity dashboard and impact. Does this belong in next year's ED goals? I mean, my problem is you can do anything you want, you can't do everything you want. I'm like, I kind of want to do everything. Problem is if we do everything, we're really doing nothing and we're just spinning. So I think that's work we've been talking about doing though, how to have legitimate conversations around achievement gap and academic monitoring in a post-pandemic, consistent and predictable manner. And the same thing on an equity dashboard that talks academic and SEL. A lot of work in there, but I think it's something we could point to in goal areas 2 and 3. And then goal area 5, I mean, goal area 5 talks about producing global citizens who embrace equity, inclusivity, diversity. This is a big work for us, and we're crushing it as we're doing that work 2 years ago. Then this year we just got so swamped with the work of the day. It'd be nice to get back to that work in goal area 5. And then high school expansion and facility. I mean, these are not small tasks. So we're going to grow a 10th grade, build an 11th grade, enroll both in the next calendar year. And I don't know if you've heard, but we're kind of working on this facility idea. There's a lot of goals up here. So I would just put that out to the board, be like, hey, you want me to do all those? Do you have a 6th one? Do you want to scratch 2? I don't know where to go, you guys. Look, I'm going to be doing all these things, but I kind of need you in my ear, like, hey, John, this is where your needs to focus. So is it okay to start that conversation there?
Yes, and I personally would ask the board to try to narrow down those 5 bullet points to no more than 3 bullet points. There is also not only fatigue on John's part, trying to take on all these goals and then report them to us at every board meeting. The board in proffering an evaluation also gets fatigued when answering for too many goal areas. And so I think there's a real balance here to make sure that it's fruitful for us and John moving forward if we can really target what we're interested in saying in the 22-23 school year.
There's also, I'm actually not doing any of this work, right? This is me directing work that the staff then have to do. Like, let's not crush our teachers under like 8 new initiatives either. But yeah, it's fatigue is something to consider.
Some of them fit together.
Unfortunately, yeah, you start like put a comma and have 3 goals in one.
So for equity, inclusion, and diversity, I feel like that's the lens for what we do in goal areas 2 and 3 with impact and academic and social emotional monitoring system. I mean, that should really be our lens.
Yeah,
when we do that work.
If you took the equity, inclusion, diversity piece and put it inside the way we monitor our systems, yeah, that's a
Instead
good
of it
lens.
it should always be our lens.
Yep. But it's also, well, yeah, yep.
I'll say, I mean, to me, to the point of fatigue, I think that's why like onboarding new leadership to me stands out as very important, because then you can take some of that and give it to, like, you know, it's helping to duplicate the U's in some ways. The more leadership there is that's as bought in and trained and brought on, then it's like, okay, great. It's a lot of commitment up front, but then you can do more of these things, which to me feels especially important as we're trying to like reconnect our community. You need more people to do that, you know, like all of these things will require a lot of leadership. And so to me, that stands out as like a thing that would help you do a lot of these other things.
Yeah. For me, I mean, onboarding the new leadership is critical to everything else on the board. Yeah.
I mean, for me, if it's all right if I go next, so I would pull off, strangely, it's gonna sound odd, I think, coming from me, I would pull off reconnecting our community as a specific call out, because I feel like that is something you inherently do, and that is something that's on all of us to do. And so that one, I think, will naturally present itself as something we'll, like, through feedback and surveys and all the things we do already, I think we'll have a measure of that one. I also really feel like the high school expansion facility is a tremendous amount of time. And so for me, really falls down to onboarding and then high school expansion. And I obviously care about academic and the social emotional systems that we put into place. But if I had to pick like two things that are really going to make or break 22, 23, I think it's onboarding and expansion facility. But that's just, yeah.
I don't disagree. I'm having like a whole internal fight right now, because I don't disagree with either of what it said. Those things have to get done. So I don't think it's an option, right? And when I'm looking at goal areas 2 and 3, the academic, in terms of like our kids performing the way that they did 2 years ago, that part is not where I would want us to get to. I just think do we have kids that are really falling behind that we need to give that additional support to? Do we have kids that really are struggling socially and emotionally that we need to give that additional support to, and making sure that that's there? And I don't know what you mean by monitoring systems. I do think that we need to implement things to make sure we're not having this achievement gap or anything like that. I think in this next year, though, it's really about, like, are we looking across those systems to make sure that, like, oh, if we have more incidents with this population of students, what's happening, and how can we unpack that for them, and how can we provide additional wraparound services? Can we make sure that we're not disciplining in a way that's not looking equitable across the board? I'm also not at the school, so I don't know how you monitor, like how you do those things without actually having some type of way to monitor it. But those things are really important to me. And I feel like as much as we have to get the nuts and bolts of our school together, that's the heart of our school. And if we're not doing those things, then we're missing a mark.
Yeah. I guess when I was crafting this piece and listening to our old board conversations, by monitoring, I guess I was thinking about board level consistent reporting. In impact, we've been talking about developing an equity dashboard to make more transparent and more predictable the type of data we're going to look at. Because when we looked at, when we talked as a board about this piece, it was about the 40,000-foot conversation around achievement gap. Like, I think our educators, it's funny because in our strat plan, in goal area 2, we very much call out that we're going to be working on professional learning communities. And in January of 2020, we were like, green light, benchmarks in place, ready to go. Teachers and then the pandemic. And I think we're coming back around on that this year. So that whole PLC, professional learning community, teachers working on data piece could fall under that, but really what I was talking about was monitoring at the 40,000-foot level, so the board was more informed on a regular basis about how we perceive the academic and social emotional outcomes. We really don't have a reporting mechanism at all for SEL. We just don't, and it's interesting work, and people are doing it in different ways. But yeah, that's what I think I was thinking here is more of a 40,000-foot report out piece. You could, because you could flip it and put the focus on the PLC work that we're doing this next year, because that's really the engine that's going to monitor students and say, oh, who is falling off and how do we get them back up? So from a performance standpoint, that's a better goal. Hey, executive director, we want you working on this PLC process that's articulated in our strat plan to make sure our staff are armed with the transparent data, the time, and the systems they need to continually monitor and improve the outcomes for kids. That's a different goal than, hey, executive director, we want very clear 40,000-foot academic and social emotional monitoring mechanisms so that when we have a board conversation, we're always talking about the same, whether it's MAP data, benchmark data, MTSS referral data things. So, I don't know if that helps, Michelle. But
It does, and I think, I'm super into those data points. I think what's more important to me are processes that make sure that we're impacting that versus just all of these dashboards and things that get created just to be able to show it. And I think in your report outs, you already kind of do that, right? When we look at test data, you break down different, ethnicities and things of that nature. And so I think what you've brought to us already has been really helpful in that lens.
Okay.
So I don't know, and I'm glad you broke that down and said like exactly what the monitoring systems were, because I don't want it to be that level of work for you.
Yeah.
So
Interesting. Okay, Ivor?
I guess I'm just thinking about goal area 2 and 3, and I almost think about like our 2 directors and that being their charge and you supporting them in that work. Does it need, it's just interesting. When I think about onboard new leadership, I mean, our director of curriculum instruction is not new leadership, but supporting that work through the leaders here at the school. Does it have to be included in your goals? I mean,
Yeah,
ultimately,
but
you're the guy in
like I
charge.
said, I don't do anything. I mean, I just direct people. I'm the executive director. I'm director of directors. So yeah, I mean, all of the work that you would be holding me accountable to would be like, hey, I will go ask somebody really smart to go do this work. Right? So yeah, it's a good point. Areas 2 and 3 are academic and social emotional. The director of C&I, Jen Kaya-U, is going to be executing on like the PLC work. And the director of student support services is kind of over that SEL side of the house. And per our strat plan, I know we're a couple years behind on the strat plan because of the pandemic, we could be right now in the moment of like, hey, new director of student support services, let's get your feet on the ground, let's onboard you. But one of the things we want to look at in this next year or two is potentially like, how are we monitoring SEL referrals and maybe even breaking them down by student groups so we know, oh, it seems to be in grade levels, or it seems to be by student groupings, by ethnicity, or by socioeconomics. Yeah. So yeah, it would be through them.
I would just also say too, like, that's a huge undertaking, and maybe we temper our expectations of what the evaluation of that goal looks like. I think progress is great. I don't think we should expect like, oh, this starts today, and next year, this
It's
conversation,
done.
we get to evaluate you on what that looks like, right?
Right.
So I think progress.
Made progress on X area. Yeah, interesting.
It's hard, because when I see, like, kind of you pointed out how John already does a good job of reporting out on those pieces, I think that's the hard part for me in making it a goal, because I don't, just because it's not a goal here, did I expect like those reports would stop happening? It's just how do we measure that in terms of, like, what is the short-term goal or the longer-term goal of that? So, I mean, if the board were, not that we won't all be here in a year, but if we aren't here in a year, like, how does it continue to be measurable?
Yeah.
And then also stay at the 40,000 foot level without, getting into directing staff on specific things that need to happen. It's just hard. It's just a constant, balance struggle.
Yeah, I hear you. I think I think there's a lot of things in terms of like how they teach, how they administrate that we shouldn't get involved in. I do think we're in a time though where, like, as we're thinking about these students and what's happened over the last few years, I do feel like we need to have that equity, like from a board perspective, making a priority that then also gets embedded into your goals, John. And so like, and again, I am not the school person, but
Yeah.
I'm thinking through like directing you on one of your goals to start that PLC learning community so that we can figure out how to do this right. To me, feels, even though it's directing you to do something that's very specific, I feel like it's time from a board
Yeah.
perspective to show the priority.
And you are only pointing to the strategic plan. I mean, you're not coming up with something new. You're
Right.
saying, hey, I think based on where we are right now, I think making progress on launching professional learning communities that have an equity lens is super appropriate. And look, like, I'm just gonna like peek behind the curtain. That's what we're doing. So like that's the work that's planned for the fall. We're onboarding a new principal who's got a PLC background and a PBIS background and a restorative practice background. Like the work is on the way. And now at the high school, since I'm an English teacher and next year I'm gonna have a second English teacher, I can now actually have a collaborative partner. Like the timing is right for this work. So Amy, I mean, I'm hoping we're gonna get some good notes, but I see that goal area 2 evolving into a focus on PLC practices so that we can produce consistent data, and at a later date we'll like do better at creating monitoring systems. But let's start there. I like that. And I'd like to acknowledge that work is through an equity lens. And if we grab that in the goal, then when we launch PLCs, I mean, I'm looking at my partners here, but as we go into the PLC work and say, hey, this is the PLC work through this equity lens, especially based on the time where we are, that's a good piece. So I think that's an appropriate goal.
Yeah, and if I could add on to that, I mean, I think that's a really good point, and we've talked about this in Impact a lot, that we all know and we all can appreciate that equity work is super important, but then there are always day-to-day fires that pull you away from that. And I think by putting that in somewhere as a strategic goal, it holds us accountable to that, and then it allows us to hold you accountable to that. We are not in the day-to-day. We appreciate that and understand how hard that is, but then can help refocus some of the like more strategic work back to like, but there's also this big priority that we have to make sure that we're dealing with day-to-day fires also in an equitable way.
Yeah. This is your accountability report card. Like, you have one employee. Telling that employee what you'd like to see happen is a pretty good idea. Otherwise, I'll just buy a bunch of confetti. I mean, we'll just have confetti every day.
It really was the best
It was
confetti.
great. It was great.
It was awesome. Can I, just with the impact team here too, like how, so part of the board's work, right, is to support the ED and to support what the school is doing. So in terms of that goal, and I'll defer to others who know a lot more than I do, would that work fit together? Because it feels very separate. Like there's two different paths to that work. If we're focusing on PLCs versus the data. So I want to make sure we're not,
I mean,
I think
Lila's right in that the reality is the PLC work is the work of the directors. The directors are my direct reports. They are going to be working on this all year. And the PLC is the engine that produces the outcomes. And those outcomes are what we're going to capture on our equity dashboard. So, I mean, they're aligned work. That, you know.
But in a way, I guess, I'm just not, what I like is what I was trying to say, if I'm trying to get to Michelle, is I think that by switching that goal a bit to focus on the PLCs, it's gonna help drive the data that Impact's looking at, which may lead to the monitoring systems. So, is that right?
No, yeah, 100%.
Yeah, so it's a nice sort of step back, that will, I think, eventually work in tandem, but we still have a lot of shaping and learning to do at Impact. But I think the PLCs and the work there, and maybe we need to do some of our own study to see how we can both support and learn from that, but I think they can tie in together really well.
I agree. I feel like that's step one before we get to that goal.
Yeah.
I'm
And so-
curious if the work of impact, when we're kind of saying, hey, what's the work, if we are doing some work on best practices with equity work in PLCs, I appreciate what you said, that we don't want to produce data just to produce data. We want to produce data to make results, to have educators reflect, to look at practices, to make changes. I'm curious if that's the work of impact. Like, the dashboard is one thing, but is it best practices on equity work in PLCs? I think there's some, what are those driving questions? What are those conversations? What are those lenses that we roll out as we're doing this work in the next year?
Yeah, as long as we just are an informative body. Remember, you know, the committee work is not to guide the work of the staff, right? But to help take some work off of staff. What we don't want to do is go into the impact committee, come up with 7 best practices, issue them to this school, and go, you should be doing these. And teachers are like, where do these come from? I don't work for the committee. You know what I mean? So we gotta walk that fine line. I think though, I mean, the job of the impact committee is to research the impact of our charter on this. Why have a charter? What are you doing? What is your impact? Love that. And also, how could we make impact? So in there is a place for us to say, hey, what impact do good PLCs have on equity outcomes? I think there's a good white paper on that. There's non-directorial, you know, that's informative, and you can issue that to admin and say, hey, this is just advisory. We went to a conference, we read some journal articles, we wrote a white paper, here's an informative piece. I also think impact could stay a little bit in the data world, because at the end of the day, like, we are a data machine, and this data is going on the California dashboard, whether you like it or not. So for us not to have good, clean data practices, so one way or another, it's coming out of here. So I kind of like us playing in both worlds. But we can talk about that at Impact.
Well, and I think it ties in, or we're not to board goals yet, right, but the third bullet is board professional development, and I think even an impact took on the idea of explaining how the lenses fit with PLCs and why that's, like, if we could come to the board, for instance, and explain an acronym, and then give not only the board an understanding, but the community understanding of how that lens will affect that work, it might be beneficial. So it's not telling anyone, like, how to do them, but the understanding of the why.
Of the
we do
why,
them.
yeah.
Because it's, like, I understand what PLCs are, maybe I don't understand the why we value them, and why we were looking for, like, why we want staff to understand them, and we take the time to make sure that they work for us. Because I'm assuming there are other methodologies we could have implemented.
Sure.
Right? But in looking at Westlake and how we like to do things, I think it might be helpful to take some time and figure out, again, the why and how the lenses of equity, inclusion, and diversity can fit into that choice.
And then once we have that, so once we have that data, right, and we're in our PLCs and we're looking at it, then what do we do? Right? So what do we do if we see discrepancies, right? And then, so we're looking through that lens, and then what do we do next? Like, that's the important work. Like, how do we help, and and then if there's systems that need to be changed or something needs to happen, like, that's where the important work happens. And that's important for you to be a part of that.
It's interesting too, because it's so Westlakey, like, PLCs are very traditionally academic, right? I mean, how much time you got in a day, how much collaborative time, how much data you're collecting. But what's interesting is, our mission statement calls out academic and social emotional. It's like, you got to go out and research some models. Like, what are you doing to really formatively apply social emotional lenses to PLC work? That might be some interesting Westlake work. Because I think we already function somewhat as a dysfunctional set of PLCs, because we've been doing it for years. But like, that SEL piece it'd be interesting. It'd be an interesting conversation. So yeah, it'd be an interesting year. I like the idea of making progress, because we will never arrive. We know that. You'll never arrive. You'll just always be stretching toward the next horizon. But I like the idea of making progress toward peace. Okay, so it was good talk. We scratched a couple things. We added a couple things.
We moved them around.
We moved them around a little bit. We embedded a few into each other. So we'll take those notes. We'll come back next month in May. And then in June's our big meeting where we approve everything. So that gives us another month. Everybody okay coming back next month with a revised set of exact goals? Very cool. Board goals.
These have consistently come before the board. The governance I feel like we did a lot of discussion around, more so one than two, but they're gonna go together. And so one thing we've all agreed to do is to look at our current board appointment process and try to come up with ways that it, could be better, and potentially creating more objective ways to evaluate future committee members. I think it should include how we outreach, how we recruit, how we fill the tank. If Josh was here, I'm sure he'd be asking for more development committee members. So those are the two pieces, and then three, to make sure, and that's why I like the tie-in about explaining what PLCs do and why. I think that's a piece potentially of professional growth that we can do here as we come back together, and just having a better understanding of the edgy world for those of us that aren't in it. But I'd love your goals. If you have ideas or changes you'd like to see. I just real fast, I think that, for instance, the equity, inclusion, and diversity lens would also go on to items I'm going to unletter them, A and B. While not explicitly stated there, there's just no way that we can review our processes and our policies without having that lens.
It is actually stated in the strat plan under goal A there. But look, it's a critical time right now. We've got a great board. We've been together for a long time, and we need to decide how to continually grow, not become static, and make sure that we're filling seats when seats become empty, and really looking at the processes to do that. I think a real legitimate goal around succession and or expansion happens through that committee recruitment and potential new committee expansion. We talked in governance about maybe creating a nominating committee, and that nominating committee would be the place where new board members were brought in, interviewed through a committee that had the power to, to act, to say, hey, we have a person who's interested in being on the board. The nominating committee has interviewed them, done background, interacted with them, and brought to the governance committee, hey, this person is vetted and potentially a good fit. Talking about practices such as, hey, if I thought I was stepping off the board, being very transparent about that. Guess I'm a bad example. I'm going to use you because I'm not a board member. But if you thought you were going to step off the board, then we become transparent about that. We let the nominating committee know, hey, we're going to have a vacancy here before too long. Wouldn't it be nice to put somebody next to this person for 6 months so they can job shadow before this person actually leaves? And we thought, being able to document that and making some succession documentation around those types of practices, not just in the bylaws, but in kind of.
Well, it's a little tricky with Brown Act, like the whole, like when we talk, yeah, we have to really think about it.
Well, we would have to think to write it down. You're right. We shouldn't just write down the things I'm saying right now. Yes, we would have to think about it and work on it. But I think we've been kind of flirting with it for a long time. Like, I think it should be a goal for us that we come out of this next year at least making progress.
Oh, no, 100%. I was
Yeah.
just thinking, I've been stewing on the whole sitting side by side thing and like training and discussion, and I was like, oh, we can't talk about how we're voting on subjects. That's
Sure.
all I,
Yeah,
sorry, I was just having like
That's
a
a leap.
lawyer
That's
moment.
a leap to the place where it can't be done. Let's stay where we could be done, which is like we could expand from 7 all that to 11, because
Yep.
that's what our bylaws say we can do.
could.
We have 8 members now. If you thought you were losing 2 members, you could bring 2 members on and go out to 10, and then 2 members could leave and you'd be back to 8. And that's a very healthy way of using our ability to expand and contract, as opposed to waiting for 2 people to leave, going down to 6 and panicking, and being like, oh my gosh, we need 2 people tomorrow. That's all I meant.
You talked about that intent to return. Too,
Yes.
like how we do with teachers on with board members, like where are
Yeah.
you at every year, and where do you think you're going to be? And
Yeah.
I thought that was good.
Yeah, an annual practice that says like, hey, I know you got 2 years left on your term. How are you feeling? Where are you at? Are you already thinking at the end of 2 years you're out? Or is there something are you moving to New Jersey and you got to leave tomorrow? Yeah, a regular process for that.
To me, it would also be helpful if we just like annually put up when people's terms were up too, because I find myself, even with my own term, like, oh, people are gone. Oh, things are,
Yeah.
okay, bye.
We
Yeah.
used to have it on the website,
Okay.
where right next to our names, it said when our term was up. It's always gonna be in your June packet. Lisa usually will try to make sure it goes there moving forward. We may not have done it last year. But that's around the
Yeah.
time when we think about it. And then maybe
Good
we put
suggestion.
it on an intent return survey too. So that way as a board member, you see it, you get multiple touches on that information. And so that you don't have to always go looking for it, it comes to you too. I can see it, just brainstorming out loud, sorry,
Mhm.
with verbal vomit, all the different ways we can have you see it.
Are there other areas?
No other areas, and I don't know that you have to like actually write this specifically, but I think one thing that we can do as board members, I actually ask my board members to do this, is to mentor. So even if it's somebody that you just know has an interest, or even if we maybe find somebody that has an interest in meeting with them over coffee once a month, just to get to know them and let them ask questions about the
Yeah.
work that we're doing in Westlake in general and our role. So I'll sign myself up to commit to that if that
I
is
love
a
it.
strategy that we want to do, because I do think we have to get serious about succession planning.
Yeah.
There's a lot of turnover in boards, not just schools, so I can only imagine you all are, we're going to experience the same thing. So I would love for you to hold us accountable
Yeah.
in terms of what strategies, we're holding up our end of the bargain to.
Well, and I really appreciate that solution, because for me, from a legal standpoint, going from 10 to 8, like the shifting back and forth makes me nervous, because I think it can present for people who don't know we're doing it that way, an optic of instability if you're constantly expanding and contracting. But if we all have mentees that we're meeting with for 6 months, say before the annual meeting or however long, right, they're at the meetings with us, does that make sense? Like, I feel like we could very much develop a Westlake process that I think achieves that goal of onboarding and learning. Because Shannon, you've admitted, like that first year with the acronyms and everything else, it's just, right, it's a lot. And so I love that idea.
It's like coffee talk with the board without the Brown Act problems.
Right. And if they're not on the board, they're a lot easier to talk to. I mean, I know that sounds weird, and it shouldn't
Sure.
matter, but it does.
Any other areas that you believe we could use for professional growth? I mean, I know some things on the edu side of the house are good, but I always think a workshop around finance is a good annual idea. I think also we've done a book read in finance, which we loved. We read like the culture code, but just any shared meaning making, any shared understanding. Going back to some of our board on track training where we're like, hey, let's all read Marcy Cornell Feist. It's a little tiny book and let's workshop that. What is a bylaw? How often should we read our bylaws? That type of thing. Any other professional growth areas that you think are of interest to the board?
No, but going back to number 2 real quick, sorry. We always talk about committee recruitment, but we've never really talked about like recruitment strategies. I mean, I know this is a place I especially have a hard time wrapping my head around because I, in a lot of ways, am like outside of a lot of the communities we typically identify that we would recruit from. And so I think just like more explicit ways that I feel like I can help those things or support that or like, yeah, I don't know what our committee recruitment strategies look like necessarily.
Right, and we talk about getting on the weekly or getting on the podcast, and that is great for our community here, but if we're looking to outreach broader for potential members, how do we do that and reach those different communities?
Well, and like, are we? I mean, I think part of this goal for me is like defining that is like, how wide of a net does that necessarily matter? If it does, then yeah, what different strategies do we have beyond like the existing Westlake community and things like that?
I don't think we have those. So
Yeah.
the goal may be developing that.
Yeah.
Before we, to get to that goal, we need to come up with what we are not willing, but what we are able to do to do that goal.
So we do the same thing for these goals as the previous goals. We bring them back in May in a little more wordsmithy specific goal, and we take a look at them again.
Can I ask though or answer for the professional growth for the board?
Oh,
I
please.
think what would be really helpful too is to know like, we all do have really diverse skill sets, which makes us great.
Yeah.
Be curious about like what skill sets are missing and are there areas where we can build those skill sets or areas where we can just continue to look and recruit for those skill sets?
Yeah. That's a good point.
I do miss the board on track.
Our little skills inventory. I know.
It was really
I know.
nice because it had pie charts and it was color-coded and it broke it down from governance to academic insights to real estate to finance. Like it had all the pieces.
But we can certainly recreate. I mean, we have it.
Do we have all those? I guess we do. Yeah, it's just you're right. That's a great tool. And we had intended to use that in terms of when we fill board seats to replace those things. We had COVID. Not that that excuse is over. I get it, but we still have to, how we move forward and readopt or change practices to achieve exactly what you're talking about. Even sharing as a group what our expertises are, and how we can best aid or participate might be helpful.
For example, like I love the public health stuff. I love government and policy, but I actually am really good at like accounting, right? So if that was a skill set that you all needed, I probably, would offer that. So I think just knowing that about each other and then seeing how we fill gaps, but also not knowing like what do we need.
It's so interesting too because when a charter school starts off as just a surviving board, people are rolling up their sleeves and getting in and helping with accounting. And then you go from a surviving board to a striving board, and you get to this point where you're like this thriving entity where you're like, where do I use my skills but stay at the 40,000 foot level because the organization seems to have all the accounting, it's just, so I think that's something that we may even consult Marcy Cornell Feist or someone else, say, hey, we are at this level where things are going as such. How do we inventory our skills and really use the skills that we have in the room?
Yeah, he uses accounting, which is a great example, but I like to, in my mind, I always think of curriculum adoption. because in a new board, right, they're like in the weeds, like
Totally.
picking out the curriculum, and now, like, because we're thriving, right,
Like
we
it-
have the experts here to tell us, through the budget, like, what we should adopt, right? We shouldn't be evaluating a phonics program, like, seriously, like, but a new board was doing exactly
Yeah,
that
yeah.
here, what, 17 years ago?
72 years ago.
So, yes, it is very interesting. I don't know if we were ever, when we sought to go from striving to thriving, no one sat us down and said, so this is what you're gonna face when you hit thriving.
Yeah.
Because it's like this goal to aim, but I really feel like we are a thriving board, and knowing how to keep that and then grow even further, it's going to be interesting work as we move forward. Not to toot our own horns.
I was gonna say, that's a good
I just
place
think
to be
we're
though.
awesome.
It's a good problem to have.
I have the latest song in my head.
Everything is
Awesome.
awesome.
Sorry for the people out there watching us on YouTube who now might hear us singing. John, did we receive any public comments on this subject
will
before
check.
I think we have a starting point to bring back for May.
Yeah,
right?
yeah, that feels good. That feels good. Thank you, everybody. Let me check the emails for public comments. Seeing none?
I'm going to bypass closed sessions for right now, just so we can close out the meeting, and then we'll go back into those. And in terms of the future agenda items, I don't have anything specifically called out for May, knowing that there's a lot in June. I think that, so just as always, you know, mindset, June will be maybe a longer meeting. But I think I have all for future agenda items. Okay? Reflection. So, what worked well, what would work better if? Sean, you mind going first?
Sure. I'm very excited that we actually got to vote on the certificated compensation this month. I was very excited for it last month and very sad we didn't get to do it. So that was great. And I'm going to pass on the other part.
You don't have to do both. You only have to do one.
Okay.
You don't need to overachieve.
Okay, sorry.
Just achieve.
Okay.
Shannon, you mind going next?
Yeah, so I just liked having a conversation around the goals in person. I mean, I think we talked about this, and impact that it allows for more back and forth. I feel, I mean, I've been obviously super appreciative for the access and that everyone can still see us on YouTube. But even though we didn't land on goals, I think it was helpful to have them there again, put this back through the lens of like, okay, things are transitioning, but things are not going back to how they were, and how do we use that to kind of set realistic goals and expectations for what this board's role is in your goals and things like that.
It was just amazing to have our new principal here and for people to get to see her face and get to hear her. And I mean, I got to experience both kinds of confetti, the actual confetti, the digital confetti. Like that was like, I mean, that was pretty amazing. So I enjoyed that.
I guess I would do that. Just having this gal over here tonight was really special. And again, having her out with staff this afternoon was a great event as well. So it was a great process. So I celebrate the process once again. And great.
Michelle?
Yeah, all the discussions around the goal areas and planning has been great. I actually think the piece that stuck out the most is that we found what the community of Westlake said they wanted in a principal, so that was super exciting. And what would have worked better is if we could have seen this confetti that we speak of.
Oh my goodness, it was so much. It was so awesome.
I know.
So funny.
But I don't know if we should have done it twice in a day. We'll have to, so one teacher may have commented how she expects to be greeted at her door every day. It said confetti, which I totally respect. I mean, talk about a great celebration.
It's Tuesday.
Right? Lila.
I loved having our principal here. I'm just gonna say something she said kind of struck me about, like, she wants to get to know people's stories. And so I'm just gonna reflect, I really appreciate your celebrations and opening up. Like, I do not know everybody on this board very well. And so I love hearing about your children and your celebrations. And I just love that that's something we do on this committee. Would work better if it's still a little awkward. I don't think there's any fix around this. I feel like I've had my back to you all night, Michelle. I'm like, oh, let's have a conversation as a board. There's like something a little awkward, but I don't think there's any way around it in this hybrid world.
And I'm the same way, like I'm leaning forward to talk and
I
then
know.
I'm cutting
It's
John
just
off
awkward.
and then I'm trying to lean back and I feel like I need to make eye contact. That parlays into what I'm really excited that we continue to work well with. And it's because of my outside world, is I know how bodies are really struggling to meet hybrid and to still have public access to what we're doing. And so the fact that Westlake and Jessica Block, how we've really brought it forward in a way where our community is still able to see what we're doing, that works really well for me. I'm super proud of that. And I look forward to continuing to do it.
That's good. What worked for me about today's meeting was really thoughtful engagement around the goal conversations. I loved Michelle's clarification on what exactly did that one goal mean and how that then evolved into the conversation of what it could be regarding PLCs. That's why I love having staff on the board. I mean, Lila and Janie both were able to jump right in and be like, hey, this is how that looks at the ground level. Thoughtful conversation on those goals. It may seem to some people out there in the world like, oh, goal setting, whatever, but like, yeah, we're talking about the next year of my life, and I take a lot of pride in the work that I do, and so setting the right goals is a big deal. So having all of you really thoughtfully engage, makes a big difference for me. So thank you. We could have shied away from it and been like, oh, it looks fine, move on. But I was glad we dug in a little deeper. Hey, Deb, you want to play?
Yeah, so I think I'll ditto Sean in that having a certificated comp packet approved, I think that will be really great for our teaching, our certificated staff. They've worked really hard this year. They've stretched more than they've ever, they're like Gumby. Gumby, right?
I think it's
Gumby,
Gumby.
Yes,
yeah,
the
Gumby.
big green guy.
The big green guy. So I think this just shows the organization's appreciation for everything they've done this year. So thanks for all that hard work.
So with that, we will go ahead and adjourn into closed session. We have 2 items on tonight, which is conference with real property negotiators and public employment evaluation. We don't anticipate any report out from these 2 closed sessions.